Hello and welcome to Current Wave. I'm your host, Ayla Wayman, and in this podcast, we meander through our shared delusions and stumble into ethereal shit talking as we dive into the waves of the human experience. I'm so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you enjoy the ride. Welcome to Current Wave. I'm really thrilled for our guest today, George H. Lewis, and he is many things: an artist, an author, an astrologer, a creator, and I think someone who's really helping usher in this new era and this new time on Earth and supporting people in that process and guiding. And I found his work online and was just so excited by it and everything that you were sharing, and really thrilled to have you on the podcast today.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And I think that I was looking at your beautiful new site earlier, which I'm excited to link and share with everyone. And I also just on like your Instagram bio, I think that that kind of sums up so much of what's happening, of like we're in this cosmic awakening and we're all really stepping into this new level of purpose and power and our own soul's path and why we're here. And it feels like that being a part of that just feels really resonant to you. And that's where I'm at, of finding my own way of supporting others in all of that. And so excited to get into deeper parts of this conversation today.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely true. I think it's why so many souls have incarnated, I believe, at this time. Exit the age of Pisces and enter the age of Aquarius. The cosmic clock has shifted in a way that it hasn't for thousands of years. Yes, the cosmic clock shifts constantly, but not like this. And we can talk about why with certain conjunctions today. It is a deep time of remembrance, actually, of the almost the human coming home, mankind coming home, in the sense of reminding of our innate power, our own sovereignty, without the false matrix of Saturn dictating how we should obey and live in this reality.
Beautiful, yes. And I think that I'm really excited to be here at this time on Earth. I think it's one of the most exciting, beautiful times, and it's intense. And I think that there's sort of this collective tower moment of this transition. And I'm definitely of the vein of belief that like we are in the process of birthing something new, and we're in a bit of that birth canal, and it's a little confusing. It's a little dark, maybe in certain corners, but I am not for the belief that like the world is ending. I think we're just getting started. And so I'm really excited to sort of tap into that from this astrological cosmology perspective and hear a little bit from you. I'm a beginning student of astrology, so I love speaking to people who can really speak to what is happening. And I don't think that we can talk about this moment without that being part of the foundation of all of the influence of the cosmos and how we're connected, and in this big transition that's happening, as you said, from Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And I would love for you to speak a little bit about what that is and what that means.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's so personal in the sense of memory, maybe of other lives or of purpose of why we're here. And the Atlantis codes, the Atlantis civilizations, plural, have always spoken to me through dreams, night dreams or daydreams. And when we look at the upcoming conjunction, literally starting in a couple of weeks, of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at the 0 point of Aries, this is a very big, exciting fault line of the clock ticking. An example, one of the major indicators of really transitioning into the age of Aquarius. And of course, with the precession of the equinox, and whether one believes in flat earth or round or something in the middle doesn't really matter, the planets, the celestial bodies, carry frequencies. And This specific frequency alignment hasn't happened for over 6,000 years. And human consciousness is at the level now. There are enough people in our communities globally who just can keep that human resonance going in the right direction. So for all the dastardly, dark stuff that has to come out, that we the people has to learn, and of course, many of us, I speak for myself, have been, I mean, for myself in the last 10 years, not, I mean, David Icke's been doing it since 1989 and others forever. But it's a sense of we have to speak that truth. We have to get uncomfortable with that Saturnian matrix that has cloaked us in a false reality. And that reality, see, Saturn is at his weakest link. One of the big things to understand, and I really mean that, to understand, not understand. To stand under is basically to be subservient. Again, a Saturn word. I come from Great Britain, which is the centre of Saturn country. Great Britain was founded in the Act of Union in 1801 under the rulership of Saturn that governs Capricorn. This is very real. Conversely, of course, in the opposition in the sky at 180 degrees, you have the sun rising in Cancer, and with the formation of the United States First Republic on July 1776, not only was the sun exalted in Cancer, but it was conjoined the two great benefics of Saturn, of Jupiter and Venus, which brings it huge, huge possibilities of truth, of abundance, of the realignment of really what the destiny of the planet is here to undertake. It was also aligned the second star Sirius B. This is no accident. It is purely prophetic that the new Atlantis, maybe married with the ancient Lemuria, is going to set sail on the Western Isles in which we inhabit. And this is why many of us are here. Now, I'm putting it in my own language vernacular, but I sense the truth of that which I'm just tapping into. It's not my truth. It is the truth, is for us to partake as co-creators. So with this upcoming Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, this civilizational shift from external authority to inner authority is going to just be ramped up. It's very, very exciting. And Neptune, that archetypal dissolving, of collapsing into the great liquid, the great firmament, the great waters, the four stages of water and all that. For most of recorded history, human civilization has been organized around external control. The gods in the sky, the divine right of kings, no longer. You and I, our collective, we're all stepping into our inner authority. It's very exciting.
Yeah. That's beautiful. It's fascinating. I have so many questions. I would love to talk a little bit about like that energy of Saturn a little deeper and like how that perhaps has been, I think of like the last century and I think of like all of the structures that sort of like needed to be put in place or were, were put in place through like the industrialization of the world and all of these like very structural like hierarchies and things. And in a sense, there was purpose to that of like developing civilization in a certain way. I mean, I believe that things that happen were meant to happen and then we can move into something new with them. But I would love to hear in your words like some of that, both like the negative and or I like to think of it as like more like the wounds and the gifts of Saturn and like what that maybe gave us, both wounding and gifting, and then moving into both and then into, yeah, just other where we're going.
So I have quite a strong view on what Saturn has represented over the last millennia, but in particular being ramped up. I'm just going to arbitrarily choose a date of 1871. I could go further back, but 1871, this is where history is really important. 1871, the Civil War had been finished and both sides had no money. They had to, sadly, turn to the European banking system. They had to turn to the Rothschild banking system of Europe. So the infiltration of Europe came in through the back door through 1871. And then what you see is slow creep, very clever, to the sinking of the Titanic. Who was on the Titanic? Three very important families. And this is part of the journey of our own work, of taking deep breaths. And we don't have to become perfect historians, but we have to be open to real history coming in. And when we learn that John Jacob Astor, the richest man in the world, was anti the centralized banking system, that Mr. Strauss and Mr. Guggenheim, all three of which were on the Titanic, and that boat was sunk. And JP Morgan was meant to be on there, and he didn't arrive. And then a few weeks later, the Federal Reserve was rolled out and put into law a year later. And the Federal Reserve has basically run the United States and through the International Bank of Settlements, the world banking system since. That is being torn down now. It's a longer story. I don't want to get into it. But we must understand that Saturn has very deliberately, Saturn takes a long-term interest. Saturn doesn't do things overnight. Let's go to the myth. Saturn takes his time. He's very strategic in a way. What does he do? He castrates his father in the myth. Who is Uranus, the sky god? Represents freedom. Too much Saturn is enslavement. Too much freedom can be chaos. But in our collective identity as a civilization, we have only experienced more Saturn than Uranus in our collective psyche. And that is beginning to shift. It's going to take some time. So I would argue that even if the systems in place back then were keeping humanity safe and secure, it was keeping us underdeveloped, undernourished, unactivated. And that's where, for example, I will sound more like someone like David Icke than a lot of other people in the spiritual community who are doing great things, but they're going to focus more, which is terrific, on just the now. I'm really interested in the polarity of understanding a little bit about our history, so we're risen up in our sovereignty of knowledge, even if it's hard, and then we flip into like the creative process of now. Because I think we're able to better create when we have a better understanding of what has preceded us, because light is knowledge. Darkness is ignorance. So again, I'm just offering that perspective. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah, I think that, these are conversations I'm really excited to have. I just keep getting so many downloads and messages about part of my role in all of this is being a bridge. I'm a Gemini. I feel like I have a lot
Brilliant.
of mercurial, like connecting busy bee energy, and love tapping into lots of different. I also have 3 of my planets are in the 11th house.
Yes.
2 of them are ruled by Gemini. So I really see part of my role as like connecting different groups, having different conversations, like sharing knowledge for everyone to be able to tap into these different ways of looking at things. I think that, to your point, in a lot of the things that you're bringing in, I think being open to another version of history where a lot of buried and untold stories is a part of this reckoning, is a part of this really waking up and seeing what has actually been, and not so much of like the narrative of what has been, because they're different things.
Really.
And we're seeing that exploding right now and having this very big moment of uncovering in so many ways. And we need that. I think, to your point, we need to understand this history and this past in order to go somewhere new.
No, it is so, you bring up so many interesting things, because in order for us to really step in to our inner authority and the creative magic that is to come, we have to be able to look back and say never again, to look back and say, yes, we were hoodwinked, individually and collectively, me included. We're all in this together. And this is where I get excited. Whether we come from a Judaic background, a Christian background, a Hindu background, a Muslim background, a non-aligned, an atheist background, actually it doesn't matter. Because when we're seeking that consciousness, that jewel of truth, we all have to do our shadow work. As I say many times on podcasts, the Christians have some heavy lifting, the Jews have some heavy lifting, and so on and so forth. Isn't that lovely when we understand that every soul incarnate, because of their unique and collective within their tribe, has their identity politics, has their baggage? It's okay. And that's part of the Pluto in Aquarius. And as an astrologer, it's lovely to talk to a fellow astrologer, because with your Gemini pact 11th house, and of course Uranus is about to enter your 11th house. That's a really, I don't want to do your astrology now, but that's a very exciting for you, something new, profoundly in the public eye. 11th is still public eye because it's visible, even if it's the 10th, which is the actual public office and how we see you in public. It's a sense of something new is coming in as a guide. And that, so to be open to that is the meta narrative for all of us, Tom, Dick, and Harry right now, is can we allow the new to come in without judgment, but also with creative excitement? Because that's part of the jewel of being human, is to activate that creative, that we're moving forward half glass, half full, rather than retreating half empty, which Saturn tends to do. And Uranus steps in, Saturn retreats.
Right. Incredible. So looking into this year ahead and kind of like even if it's just the broad strokes of the energetics and of the signatures of the movement of some of these planets, I know that Neptune just moved into Aries, Saturn is moving into Aries. We have this final moment of the wood snake and moving into the fire horse, and there's a lot of energy. It is so charged. And I would love to speak to some of the things that you're seeing or feeling and the downloads you're having of perhaps what's happening and where we might be going.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's a lot going on. I mean, right now, I mean, I was actually reading a friend of mine, and she's a brilliant astrologer, Laura Eisenhower. I don't know whether you know her. And she just wrote she's a great writer, and she wrote something about the Uranian voltage is going to be stoked in the coming weeks right now, because Uranus has just stationed direct, and he's going to gather quite a lot of power in the coming days and weeks as he moves full steam ahead and eventually gets into your sign, Gemini, in the late spring, early summer. I think right now, for February, we've got obviously Uranus in the late stages of Taurus, which in some ways mirrors that wood snake. We're at the final stages of shedding the old. Taurus is fixed earth. It's the most inert of all the 12 signs, meaning it's deliberately meant to be deliberate, slow, methodical. And when Uranus moves through it, it's been very unstable for people, especially with Taurus energy. And they've had to learn to shift in a way that people like yourself haven't found that energy as difficult in that type, because of the Gemini can shift just archetypally more easily. So I think one of the things is to allow that Uranian energy of shedding, because it's in Taurus and it's still with the wood snake, but ultimately Uranus is going to move into Gemini in a few months' time. Pluto's already moved into Aquarius, but will be there for another 15 plus years. Saturn, Neptune, poised to enter the 0 point of Aries. All the outer planets, all the trans-Neptune planets have basically moved into new signs. You know, Uranus, Saturn, Pluto. It's a big deal. Neptune. And it hasn't happened like this for a long, long time. And they tend to be trines on the whole, sextiles and trines. If you look at the sky, and you see Pluto at 3 degrees, 4 degrees Aquarius, making a trine with Uranus, about to make a trine with Uranus going into 0, 1 degree Gemini. They're going to trine for a couple of years together. That's beautiful confluence of harmonics of the spheres. And then in the middle is this sextile, mutual sextile between the two of Saturn, Neptune at the 0 point of Aries. I mean, I've looked at the charts for many years now of the Second World War, of the Civil War, and of the Revolutionary Wars, and each time those wars happened, there were major squares in the night sky. This time, methinks not. And it's not even about my belief system. It's about just calmly looking at the astrological forecast that we see more trines and sextiles. So what does that mean? It means that the wind is on our back as a civilization, that the media Saturn is going to blow the horn in a very dark way, because that's what Saturn does when he's losing control. We've all read King Lear, Shakespeare. It's not rocket science here. We are really seeing the dismantlement of an ancient system, which is really connected out of the Vatican and the British Empire. It is. And it's the confluence of many different interests, but if I'm going to summarize, it's the confluence of negative Jesuit and negative Khazarian influence. And the more that we, the people, wherever we come from, realize that, we heal it. And in that sense, it's not rocket science, but we have to understand what the Matrix has done for so long to us. And many, many people are enslaved within the system to such a degree that they will follow the old system in attacking the new, because they're either so frightened, but B, because of that fear, they're so propagandized through mind control. And soft mind control, it doesn't have to be MK Ultra through the alphabet agencies necessarily. It can just be the normal mind control of media manipulation. And so the Great Awakening, which is happening, is breaking that apart. And I'm ultimately very positive that the planetary energies are going to support, they are not just going, they are supporting the active higher consciousness coming in, breaking open the mind, introducing new levels of awareness, helping humanity see beyond the old limitations. It's very exciting.
It is. It's really exciting. And for people who are perhaps like really just coming to, just waking up, I mean, I've been on my own like continuous journey of waking up, and I'm sure I will always be. There's so many layers of illusion to allow to dissolve and to move into more and more embodiment and truth and the deeper layers of truth that I think are coming out. But a lot of my friends are sort of just starting to be like, wait, what's going on? And to speak to some people who maybe some of this information is new to, and if you have any words of advice or grounding of just like, how can we really navigate this time together and to be open? Like, how can we be open to things that are perhaps different than we thought? Because I think this process is going to just be continuous of this shedding. And I really want to support people in it.
Well, I think I'm only meeting you today, but I also read energy. I think you're in a very important position to help many of those newcomers. And I would say, actually, you're probably in a much better position to help them in many ways than myself, because I'm kind of a seasoned traveler on this. And if I'm really speaking from the heart here, I've learned to use words in the last 10 years to be clear, but to be kind, to limit, to not to burst open, not to be too radical, not to scare people too much. And when I say scare, I don't mean fear. I mean shock them into the new. I am unabashedly very freedom, future orientated. And that has its issues for a lot of people. And so let's go back to your archetype, the Gemini bridge, 11th house. I don't know which other planets. Do you have Venus in Gemini?
I have Venus, yeah, Venus and my sun are conjunct in Gemini, and then Mercury's in the 11th house, but it's in Taurus.
In
So
Taurus.
it's 1 degree away from my Venus. They're all within 5 degrees of each other.
But it's also, that doesn't surprise me, your Venus, your Mercury being in Taurus, because actually the way you actually communicate is slower and more deliberate, actually. You would be faster in your communication style if your Mercury was in Gemini. But the point is you offer that bridge to the newbies coming in, which is very beautiful. We've all got our dynamics. Like so many people in my community, I've been humbled in losing some very, very dear and special relationships, including a very close family member of mine, because of my views.
Sure.
So, everyone's got different pathways. These are different soul contracts. Your soul contract is probably going to start lighting up very fast as Uranus goes into that 11th in a few months' time and offering that bridge. And so I would say to the people coming in, learning for the first time, where their world gets shattered, in some ways, those people coming in now will be the fiercest fighters for freedom. Mm-hmm. Because as they do learn of the switcheroo, the 180, the anger initial is vast, and then the grief, but then it goes to action.
Yeah.
And there's a freshness. I remember taking one of my students to Venice for the first time. I was at university there. I've been there all my life. And that's a dark and a light place, I'll have you know. But I loved seeing it through her eyes. It gave me, being that old seasoned traveler, a lot of vitality. So sometimes when you meet someone, it's almost the child archetype. You see, when you suddenly discover something new, it's amazing the energy that goes into that. So I would say those people discovering the truth, and of course it's always unfolding, it's not just the truth. It's like, wow, keep going, stay in that creativity, stay in that opener, the heart opening. Let's be brave to ask questions. I'll give you an example for myself and against myself, because depending on where people are at. I am increasingly open to questioning the narrative of the Second World War. That is such a hot potato for so many reasons. It's so complex, so deep. But I look you in the eye and I look your community in the eye and I say, because I'm only interested in truth. I'm only interested in that frequency to come down and for our frequency to come up, because the awakening can only occur when we look each other in the eye, and say, we want truth. We don't want deception any longer. And no one's to blame. And it doesn't matter, with the Second World. I mean, it can be against myself profoundly with Winston Churchill as a Brit. Profoundly. I'm talking against my culture. I'm not just talking against a German culture, a Jewish culture. It's so much bigger because we're in this together. And I find that very healing, even if it's very controversial.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I respect and admire your willingness to speak to things that a lot of people aren't. And like, I'm not as seasoned a traveler as you in a lot of ways. So I'm in this moment of myself of wanting to have more complex conversations and like really also share my own curiosity with others of like, yeah, I don't really know what's happening, but I also am in search of truth. And I think that is like this binding force that can hold all of this together of like really being open to what is actually true and to do that with that open heart, open mind, and be able to confront things that are difficult or really not what we thought. And I think that is so important in having these conversations with people whose opinions are completely different from ours,
Totally.
or
Yeah.
similar from ours. And it's vital. Like I think that is a vital freedom and a vital pathway that we have to step into. And I'm stepping into that continuously of like, I haven't had a conversation like this on the
Yeah.
podcast. I've mostly been speaking to like my close friends and people who I am in like exactly my sphere. And I'm just getting the sign like it's time to step out of that.
So actually, and also to build on what you've just said, and here's the excitement. As the new knowledge of technology, and when I'm talking technology, I'm not talking diesel gas, I'm talking 0 point energy, I'm talking time, I'm talking Project Looking Glass, I'm talking time travel. When this type of information comes in, real Tesla technology, and the hidden portals, Antarctica, Greenland, the ancient civilizations, the galactic. I mean, it's interesting. I'm increasingly getting asked to speak at galactic conferences. And I ask sometimes myself, why do they want me? I haven't lived in a spaceship in this body yet. I'm not in the secret space program. But what I can speak to is as an earthling, that if we understand the astrology and we understand what's been hidden from us, the Smithsonian kept all the artifacts down from the Grand Canyon, we weren't allowed to go and see it. There's so much out there. When this stuff comes in, then the breath of wow, the awe, is anchored into the body, into the collective and the individual, where then the Second World War becomes easier because the pictures become so much bigger about our true history, our true identity, our cosmic brotherhood, our cosmic DNA. The DNA that's been manipulated, Anunnaki as far back and further, learning about the vastness of who we are. Alex Collier's mentored me from afar for many years, one of the great contactees of the Andromedans. And so, it's really interesting. And so when we come into that, and that's Uranus going into Gemini, making a trine to Pluto and Aquarius to get technical from. Yeah. And so suddenly then, through that energy, learning about the Second World War, the Civil War, learning about true history becomes much easier because suddenly the difference between Jew, Muslim, Christian, atheist becomes utterly irrelevant. Bingo, we have liftoff.
Yeah, and I think that perspective is so great. Like I was actually having this conversation with a friend last night of like we've been sort of channeled into this very narrow vision of everything. Like that constriction, maybe that is like some of that Saturnian. I think of Saturn so much as like going through the eye of a needle and it's limited. It's limited and there is expansion on the other side, but it's tough. And we're thinking so small about everything, and this vast knowledge of even just who we are as humans I think is about to be opened up in a way that is inconceivable.
Spot
And
on.
I kind of had touched on this when I emailed you, but like the night that Trump was elected, I feel like I was contacted
Yeah,
by
I was too.
beings, and it was just like the craziest experience. And I recorded voice notes while it was happening in my sleep, and they were there for months and I just hadn't listened to them yet, and when I went to listen to them they had all been deleted, and it was really interesting. But I was just getting the message that like
You were
we're
over the
entering
target. You were totally
the
over the target.
golden age, like hang on, be the bridge was the message they just kept saying. And it was like these interdimensional beings that I was seeing them, they were sending me messages. And I have channeling abilities, but not with that. Like, I've never had that
I
experience.
mean, I reckon I'm going to be really honest with you, and I haven't even looked at your chart, but I see it, and you've already told me a little bit. You have quite a few planets over the Seven Sisters, over the Pleiades star system, and when I look at you, I definitely sense you've lived many lives, as I have, in the Pleiades, and I suspect because you and I both, and we've never discussed it, got those certain downloads, uniquely individualized and different, but yet collectively coming from the same energy system, there is a strong, older, Palladian, non-terrestrial thing going on within our psyche, within our unconscious, and in a way we've been activated. I got activated around the timeline change of 2016, 2017, if that's what you're discussing. We're in the same boat, and it's very, very fascinating.
It is. It's really fascinating. And just the scale of this, I think, is going to be incredible, but shocking. But if we can hold some level of the vastness of all of this, and, I also am very much an earthling and simple, and like hold some of those old codes of simplicity, of the earth, of the seasons, of these cycles. And I think part of my work is bridging these two things. But when we just think of ourselves as this drop in this ocean, and we have to kind of have this greater perspective of the evolution of humanity, and yes, we're here and our role is important and potent, but there's just so much, and there's so many lifetimes, and there's so much happening, perhaps all at once. And I think that having that huge zoomed out perspective just does help us to hold some of these pieces that are probably just continuously going to surface a little bit lighter and a little bit more open. And as you were saying, like, when we're thinking of ourselves as part of this like cosmic wild thing with beings from all of these other systems and worlds, then yeah, the specifications that we've lived in on this earth do become irrelevant. You're like, who cares? In a way. And yes, like grounding into who we are and why we're here at the same time, and knowing that our role is important.
And in a way, we create ourselves out of the old system. In many senses, we don't need to fight the old. We need to witness it, learn about it, alchemize it through creating new systems. I spoke a little bit about this just on my Instagram a few hours ago. Small insight into the concept of localization and individuation. And the more we can return to the archetype of the homestead, grow our own food, understand the sacredness and the healing powers of water, structured water, all these things, and get back, as you said, to the land, the sacredness of it, the integration of Gaia and human, the remembrance. Then you see what happens. Saturn loses without the fight, because Saturn traditionally always has more resources. And I mean, I could go in many directions from this, but I would argue the great psyop that is called Q, and obviously the media call it QAnon, which is nonsense. It's Q, it's military intelligence, and it's anons like oneself who've tried to, because I'm a decoder, look at symbols. I look at symbols. I'm fascinated. And what it does is that psyop activates many human beings around the world to remember their divine light codes, you see. It's that simple. And because it's about sovereignty, individualized sovereignty. And when an individual and then collectively can all be anchored in that self-sovereignty of family, community, of love, authenticity, there's nowhere for Saturn to go apart from to support Saturn's structure, to support that. So the new Saturnian system, you see, I don't want to always be negative about Saturn. The new Saturnian is to support the individual. The new Saturnian, which actually is the ancient ruler of Aquarius, along with Capricorn, is to support the individual within the collective identity. The flattened, inverted Saturn is transhumanism, and we all become a digital inversion of the a digital enslaved peg in the collective identity, which is really the transhuman agenda, which is the inversion of the Aquarian age, the real Aquarian age, the Christ consciousness. And again, Christ consciousness, the energy of Christ, is a universal energetic. And I would say it's very closely connected, not just to the ascended masters, but to the Palladian star system, and where there is a merging and understanding of polarity consciousness. And it is through conscious choice integrated, where you don't have the satanic, dastardly corruption, mainly against children. And I think that's where we're very slowly, but also quite fastly, again, polarity, moving towards that opportunity on planet Earth where there will be no wars because we've moved out of that and we don't allow the reptilian psychopathic parasite to, whether it's galactic or humanoid, is irrelevant. We don't allow it because we've learnt enough to see how they manipulate through lies and deception. That's Saturn, you see. And that's where, again, this dance back with history is so important, to understand her story. And the history was always written back recently by the parasitic class. So we have to rewrite it, relearn it, reoralize it, re-remember it, and then alchemize it to create a new Saturn which supports the individual flourishing in community.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm with you. And I want to go a little bit into your story and your path and how you got to where you are, which I'm sure there are a lot of pieces to that, and I'm sure it's a whole arc. But I do want to touch on it because I think that it really helps to hear people's paths in some way and like that meanderingness that shows us how we arrived to who we are now, and just any part of that feels relevant right now that you would want to bring into this conversation, to your curiosity of the stars, of humanity, of these really big pictures.
I think, where should I start? I definitely felt very alone and isolated as a soul growing up in Great Britain, in England. I mean, I grew up materially very comfortable. I was very blessed. I went to one of the poshest, best schools in England. But I knew something in my soul wasn't right. And I suppose in reality, it wasn't until the timeline shift that you've just described, when we got various downloads around 2016, 2017, did it all start to make much more sense. But even leading up to that point, I was always trying to figure it out. But and of course, I realized I grew up within the central power play of the matrix system, the British Empire. And it's interesting, I was very close to my grandmother. I'll share this. My grandmother was a double cancer, and she lived until she was 91. She died 10 years ago. So I was very blessed to have almost, quite a lot of three plus decades with her. And I absolutely loved her so much, and I miss her so much. But she was always so fond of America. And it now makes sense. She was a closet mystic. She wasn't an overt one. She was behind the scenes. She was very wise. She always understood what America stood for. She loved the concept of the Constitution, the freedom. She loved the can-do, go-get. And of course it has its negatives, as we've all learned. The mainstream media has been very anti-American for decades and decades, very deliberately. But she kept that frequency. And I think that optimism steered me when I was down in England, when everything was glass half empty. And I didn't have that many close friends, a few. And I moved to America 15 years ago. And I can't say it's always been easy, but home is definitely the United States, because the philosophy is so vital. And just on a very humble level, I'm here in my own humble way to show people just the potential of what humans can achieve when we can lean in to understanding what the constitutional republic is and how it was birthed and who the unknown stranger was when it was created on that hallowed day of July 1776, with those two conjunctions of Venus and Jupiter with Sirius, our twin star system, and how potent it is in terms of prophecy and future orientation of our planet. Russia plays a major key too. I love the books Anastasia. So, I mean, for me, I was a bit of a misfit, but I was socially quite adept. So I still had friends. For a while in my 20s, I ran a couple of nightclubs with a friend. Quite atypical. Most people have no concept that I would do that, no imagination. But I became the master psychologist because I wasn't really much of a drinker. British people love to drink. They love to tell stories. And everyone would tell me their story. I mean, we had some pretty amazing people come to my nightclubs. And I think that set me up without me even knowing it. This is the great thing about journey work as a human being. None of us know where it's going to go. If people say, because I'm very blessed, people say I'm not a bad intuitive astrologer and I work in the healing arts with sound and help people. I think those 5 years in nightclubs in London really helped me because I have a few planets in Gemini. They're not the positive ones, but I work pretty hard. They were Saturn and Mars, but I really like to listen to stories. And so that was a big part of me. But I felt it very limiting at the same time. And then after a few years of doing it, I just became a full-time artist. And then I started to travel a lot. I lived in the Middle East and I've been to over 100 countries. And the British people are lovely people. They're utterly downtrodden by the civilizational structure, which is breaking down. And the opportunity for Britain to emerge is great. But Britain has a very stark choice, really. Like most of Europe, it's got some really hard-hitting issues to deal with because the European culture is basically going to totally collapse unless something spiritual happens, you see, to galvanize it, to understand freedom. Again, whether it's the Muslim infiltration, they have to get into their spiritual authority. They have to go beyond the Allah and the Kaaba. Every religion has got serious heavy lifting to do, much as the fundamental Christians in southern United States. And some of them, have turned on me because I do too much Christ consciousness, I don't do enough Bible logic. You see, this is the truth, is if we're stuck in very strict belief systems, it's going to be very, not only uncomfortable, you're actually going to get sick. You're actually probably going to get cancer. Where if you allow, it's okay. My gosh, I thought it was that, but it's possibly this. And it may not even be this, but for a while it's this until it's that, because it's a bit like, imagine they discover all this ancient technology, which they've already discovered, but it comes out to we the people in it, the bottom part of the Grand Canyon and Antarctica. And there's this sunken Anunnaki huge ship in Greenland. Once we the people understand that technology, that it's all been hidden from us, the difference suddenly between whether we're really a strict Muslim or a strict Jew or a strict Christian becomes irrelevant. And that's where I'm very positive. But we're going to need a bit of support of that disclosure, which is going to happen astrologically. It's going to start, the disclosure's really happening May onwards this year, and it will play out for a few years, but I'm super optimistic, which will help us get over some of these ancient Saturnian rivalries that we've all been stuck in, and it's been very hard, and it still keeps us in fear and grief and needing to retreat. If I say something which is too outward, people will take offense, where it's not. It's just trying to open up, peel the onion, just to get a bit closer to truth.
Yeah, beautifully said. Totally. I love that. And I do think that speaking to your path and our paths and those moments when we're younger that shape us and that only make sense in retrospect, and your curiosities that you had then and the nightclubs and speaking to a lot of different people. And I think that, yeah, I just like, I love to pull those threads and to see them of how we find our way. And so through your travels, you are also an incredible artist and a sound healer. And how did those things start pulling you? And also, how did the stars start speaking to you? And
that's an easier question than the last one, because you see,
okay.
because the last one, I love Britain, I love the people, but I'm very anti the structure. And I always want people to understand when I'm critical of stuff, it's like the monarchy. I'm not talking about the individuals. I actually have such compassion for the people playing those roles. I mean, what's going on, I don't know, because I've lived in America for too long. Even if I was at school with William and Harry, it's a long time ago. The thing is, for me, it's the structure that doesn't support the evolutionary growth of consciousness. That's where I get on my soapbox. It's just I want structure to support the people truthfully, and they haven't. But you asked me about art. Well, I've always been an artist, but I think all human beings are in different ways. Now, some artists are amazing dancers. Some are amazing potters. I happen to be a chorister at school. And one of the things I was able to do is I was able to, this is as a 9-year-old boy at a boarding school, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old boy, I would put other boys under the big church bell and gong them. And everyone felt really happy. I felt happy. We didn't know it at the time. We were healing each other through frequency. So music's always played a big part. The whole notion of professionalism to me is also so silly. Yes, I got to live with the Tibetan monks in Bhutan when I was painting the royal family 8, 9, 10 years ago. That definitely was a catalyst to me to start to use bowls in a more precise fashion of understanding frequency, absolutely. But I've also continued in my own path. I'm very fascinated by water. I've studied obviously Emoto and Veda Austin and Schoberger's work over the years. I mean, Veda Austin is contemporary. What she does with memory and water is outstanding. And so, you put human beings, which I now do, in salt water, which mirrors the blood. I can help unlock their spines through sound frequency. It's incredible. So the music and the art has always played a part. I've always been a painter. I was a good drawer at school. I always did it as an amateur. I never did it professionally. I never went to an art school. The only decent art schools I knew when I was growing up, when I was potentially going to the art schools in the 90s, were in Italy, in Florence, and they were traditional, because all the modern art schools in London and New York were, to me, totally, totally corrupt. And that's another conversation I'm okay having with you another time, on the nihilism of the art world, which is very deliberately to keep people in despair. And art, to me, has always been celebratory about how we connect with the divine in our own unique ways, of course.
Yeah.
And of course, we should paint grief and despair, of course, but we shouldn't have an art system, again, Saturn, deliberately keeping us separate from source, from God. Absolutely not. And that's very deliberate. Art's played a major part for me, music, painting, and then the astrology came. Well, it started with astronomy. I was living with a Bedouin in Saudi Arabia in the Empty Quarter, which is a large desert. And I had a camel at the time. She's still alive. She's called Fatima. I was gifted her by the Al Rashidi tribe of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. And we were journeying under the night sky, and I took all these lovely photographs. I was a photographer. I'd been painting for the royal court in Oman and for various different people around the Arabian Peninsula. And I was so caught up by the stars. I just couldn't believe I could see them so cleanly and clearly on the horizon right up. It's like being on a ship in the middle of the Atlantic. And I started to ask questions, and it was all astronomical. And that was 2007, 2008, 2009. And then in my New York studio in 2000, I think it was 12 or 13, it was quite late. A strange man came into my art studio and said, "Dear boy, I want to teach you astrology." And I kind of not laughed at him, but I said, "Prove it to me." And after literally a couple of sessions, I was blown over by the archetypal route. And he was a Jungian astrologer. He was a cosmologist, an amazing, amazing man called Monty Taylor, who sadly died a couple of years ago. A mythologist, exceptionally gifted. Jungian mythologist, and he guided me, he instructed me, he mentored me for close to 2 years. And I remember at the end, he turned to me, and I burst into tears when he said, "George, I don't want to see you any longer. You know more than I do. Off you go." And I never saw him again.
Beautiful. I love that. I love all of these pieces and these little snippets of this full picture and this full story of who you are and why you're here. And I don't think anyone can just be confined to that. And I also personally believe that our stories can be very constricting to us. And so it's this beautiful dance with them of the things that we've been through and gone through and experienced that make us who we are, and just holding them lightly and just letting it all be fluid and ever evolving. And I really see that in you, and I love that. But I wanted to touch on some of the experiences that you've had that have brought you to where you are. So thank you for sharing those.
It's my pleasure.
And I was looking at your site earlier, and there's this beautiful audio. And going off of kind of what you just shared, I really do see you as this beacon of being this human on earth, this multi-layered, evolving, creative person. And I hold this similar belief that all of us are that. Like, we are innately creative, amazing beings that I think our capabilities and potential are just starting to be really felt and seen and tapped into. But I would love to hear a little bit more on that from you, of just like how we can really tap into our gifts and who we are and why we're here, and opening to greater potential and allowing ourselves to sort of be fueled by the universe, by God, by source, by something greater than ourselves, to create and expand and like touch as best we can our potential in this life.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if we can start with the heart, which is the toroidal field, and open up a pathway energetically in our inner self, between our higher self and our physical self, if you like, between what we consider to be this being and our higher self. The soul is eternal. And you start to read synchronicities. You start to get downloads. I'll give you an example. And I feel I should share this today because it came to me this morning. So only 5 or 6 hours ago before this interview. The number 591 came to me today. I had to remember it came out of my sleep. I explored this through my dream and went back into it. It's a frequency. The archetypal meaning of 591. 591, 5 plus 9 plus 1 is 15. 1 plus 5 is 6. When we see 369, it's energy, it's flow. Some of the best sounds, not always, but they carry that reduction into 369. Tesla said to know the secrets of the universe, not only do you think in terms of frequency vibration, but also to do with movement, it's 369, always derivatives. And so for me, I have to now go along with this 591 and find more meaning for me as a frequency, as a meditation, as a tool, as a portal to give me some information, which maybe I can share with you another time once I've matured into that knowledge. Every human being has their own thing that they need to do to become more aware, to be more connected. We've all been, me included, severely disconnected. So there are many ways to do it. Tidy your water up, get closer to structured water, which is from spring. I often drink from waterfalls. I've been in the Andes for the last 2 months in South America. I've been drinking from the water that comes off the granite, and the energy in it revitalizes me. Eating no more synthetic food. No, 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 no. And if you're eating meat, you have to know that it's been killed decently, because otherwise it carries the trauma. And so it's just learning about this stuff. I mean, it's too big a conversation to have. We could go for 2 more hours, but it's like start to understand your emotional connection, your heart chakra with your higher self, and start to play that dance synchronistically. I mean, Carl Jung always talked about synchronicity. And so when we tap into that synchronicity, we start to see the signs. And as a numerologist, symbologist, astrologer, that's what we're doing, is we're reading the symbols. And then it starts to make sense. And then you start to activate your own journey. And so literally within a few months' time, one is on a totally different trajectory to where we were. And I can speak with authority on this because there have been many times in my life when I have reduced myself into a limitation. And now, in a way, Uranus is really activating me, has done, especially in the last few years. So we're all opening up in our own unique way, and it's very exciting. I don't know whether that answers the question.
It does some way, yeah, totally. I think, what I'm hearing you say is really tuning into that heart space, really looking for those synchronicities and following them, exploring them. You were given this number this morning, and who knows where it's going to lead you in your inquiry, but following the inquiry. And I think in my words, I would say, yeah, like those synchronicities. We started, before I started recording, talking about the synchronicity of my mom and you have been chatting. And I think maybe a year ago, like we both had found your work and maybe discussed it briefly, but she didn't remember that. And then it's like, okay, amazing. Like I feel even more meant to have this conversation, even though I felt drawn to doing that. And then another added layer of you and my mom having.
I agree with that. It's so interesting because when she told me that you were her daughter, it made it more meaningful, my connection with her, that there's a purpose.
Yeah.
We're both here this triangulation is here to learn. And now I learn a little bit about your chart and the Palladian connection. That's got me very fascinated. But quickly, if I can also go back to the 6, which of course 591 adds up to 6, the root number suggests integration, suggests concepts of harmony after chaos, responsibility, heart-centered alignment. That's what the 6 is. Where the 3 is a trinity and the 9 is completion. We can go into that another time. So it's, in some ways, I'm representing now where I'm at, and I can share it, a sort of recalibration, a sense of restoring balance and coming from the heart.
Beautiful. Well, I would love for you to just share some ways that people can work with you and where they can find you. I will put links to your website and your Instagram and anything else, but I would love to hear in your own words a few ways people can connect more.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think the best way is through the website. I'm quite proud. I'm very happy. I've just redone it, and it's the first time in quite a few years.
It's so fun.
It really represents me at the moment with my art and astrology, my offerings. and my community. And anyone who wants some astrological, intuitive work, sound frequency. I mean, I offer this thing called A Day with George. It can be tailor made for people wanting to spend some time with me where we can go deep. And the other thing I think I really am in offering well, and it's part of my soul contract, is community. Like tomorrow, one of my retreats, I'm here in Mexico City speaking with you now. I drive to Acapulco tomorrow where I host 15 students coming. And yes, we're doing all this sound therapy and astrology and fire release burn ceremonies. But actually, when I'm really honest, what I think makes me most contented is bringing soul family together and then them doing their amazing stuff with it. And I hear through many, because I did 7 retreats around the world last year, and I hear these amazing stories of, Tommy being best friends now with Sally, and they've set up this and that. I love that because so many of the people in our communities who are more awake have been very isolated. And so, in a way, for me, the healing and all that's very important, but it's the community that we all so crave. And I know I've benefited profoundly from that community as I am today meeting you. And I think that's the offering, really.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think it really is so powerful, especially right now, to be with people who are in the same lane and the same frequency on the same movement. And that really is such a catalyst for everyone. And it just feels coherent when you're in those rooms where you know you're meant to be there with those people. And that sensation of like, oh, I remember all of you. Like we've been traveling together in this pocket of our souls being going through the soul journey all over the planet. So I'm so glad that you are gathering people in that way and sharing your magic in that way.
Thank you so much. It's been such a
Yeah,
pleasure chatting
yeah.
with you
Thank you
today.
so much, George. I'm so grateful for having you. Okay, amazing.